with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
What goes into an investigation like this? People are just so desperate for answers in that community.
Yeah, and I have to say, we're desperate for answers too. These are investigations, whether it's, it doesn't matter. Anytime we're investigating a death on a roadway, we take this very seriously. That's our charge. Our job is to investigate the final moments of someone's life. So a lot goes into it. There's a lot of different factors, whether it was, on a well-traveled roadway or if it was rural, such as we saw here. Obviously, we have a horrible tragedy of 4 young lives lost, 2 more changed forever. So there's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, that entire community has really changed forever. What makes this investigation so complex? You mentioned there how remote that area is. I mean, there's probably not a security camera in miles of that area.
Yeah, you raise a great point. When we have crashes on our freeway systems or even in more urban areas, chances are there are other motorists that have seen what happened. There are cameras out there that have recorded either the entire crash or part of the crash. In this situation, we're dealing with a very rural area of Marin County, where, as you mentioned, there may not be a camera around for a very long distance. So it just changes how we have to investigate it. It changes how we have to seek those answers. And that is really where our investigators come in and do that job.
So one of the survivors, there are 2 girls that survived this. One has been released from the hospital, and her mother said that they were in this car, that they swerved to avoid a car that had kind of veered into their lane. I'm sure that's one of the scenarios that you're looking into. Is there a device in a car that kind of records the car's movements? And do you have access to that to see what happened?
Yeah, so there is. In most vehicles, there's what's called an airbag control module. This is the device that actually determines whether or not your airbags deploy in a crash. But this device not only determines that, but it also actually records data that we can use to piece a crash together. And this is going to be things like, speeds of a vehicle, which seats were occupied, were they belted. There's a variety of different data that we can use. Now, I want to point out, though, you mentioned the scenario where there may have been a vehicle that crossed over. So in this situation, as much as we are here to prove what did happen, part of that investigation is also working to figure out what didn't happen. And sometimes that can be the most difficult part of an investigation. Trying to prove a negative, essentially, is a very difficult thing to do.
And that same survivor's mom also said that these teenage girls, 14, 16 years old, were not drinking. Do you still take drug tests and alcohol tests from the survivors and the driver?
Well, more so for the driver, we want to be able to determine anything that played a factor in this, whether it was drugs or alcohol, whether it was technology, whether, there were other things going on in that vehicle. And it's not even necessarily that we may believe or not believe that that happened. But again, we also have to be able to say we check these things and confirm that they did not play a factor, just so that there aren't remaining questions when that final report is issued.
And as you look into the different things that could have been happening with those girls in the car, do you also examine, their past 24 hours, like what they had been doing before, sort of recreating their steps? Do you look at their social media accounts?
Well, we are going to go through their last 24 hours, as you mentioned. And it's a very, in this situation, I would have to say, this is a very hard case to investigate. I think any first responder out there, not just law enforcement, but any first responder will tell you, when you have a crash or a tragic incident like this involving teens, it's just a difficult thing to have to investigate. So it's something we still are going to be very thorough about. Obviously, we take this very seriously, as I already mentioned, but cell phones that played a factor in this, something like that. Again, we don't rule anything out until we can. So it's really just a very broad look into everything that could have possibly played a factor in this.
And this crash happened last Friday night, and as we mentioned, and people really want to know, what happened as they try to move forward and see closure in this. How long does it take you to investigate something like this to determine what happened?
Well, again, I think the most important thing I can really stress is that Our responsibility here is to conduct an incredibly thorough, very detailed investigation into this incident. And while we understand everyone wants answers, again, we want those answers as well. But we have to ensure that we don't compromise accuracy and thoroughness for the sake of time. We want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure we've looked at everything we possibly can to figure out exactly what happened in this. So we are continuing to work hard, both our Marin area office and investigators from our multidisciplinary accident investigation team. They are the ones that are going to be examining the vehicle and really just everything we can put into this to make sure that we get this right.
And with that, how critical is it to speak with the witnesses, these Good Samaritans who were there and pulled these girls out of the burning car, and also speak with the two survivors?
Well, any information that we can get that is, pertinent to this crash is going to be important. And like we tell people very often, and we've made this call for anybody that may have seen anything or know anything to please contact us, because sometimes what may seem like an inconsequential piece of information to you could be something very important to our investigation. So any information that we can get is always valuable.
We hope people with information do come forward and that we can get some closure and some answers for that community. Sergeant Andrew Barclay, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.